Thanks very much, Linda, and good morning, everyone. It's delighted to be here this morning, genuinely delighted to be back working with Engage with Age, an organisation that was one of the first organisations that I ever had contact with when I started in the age sector just over 10 years ago. So I've always been extremely impressed by the work and the role that Engage with Age has played in South and East Belfast, and I think today's event is a great opportunity to showcase and highlight one of the big issues that I'm trying to focus on in my term as Commissioner, the issue of loneliness and isolation, an issue that I think hasn't received as much focus in the past as it should have, but as an issue that really does affect many people very deeply in our society. And I think by having events like today, we can raise the issue, make it more high profile, and remind authorities about the important work that goes on in the community and about how that actually really has a significant effect on older people. And I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces here today for this event, and I'm glad to say that I can stay for the full morning, and I really, looking at my diary this week, this was the event that stood out for me, and I think I'm looking forward. I mean, the readings at the start were just excellent, and I'm looking forward to more readings and music as the day goes on. But I think it is an important issue. You know, I think when we look at the issue of an ageing population, one of my priorities in my term of office is to support policies for the ageing population. And that's saying to government that we have an ageing population. That's a good news story. But if we're going to make that work for us as a society, we need to support older people so they can continue to make the massive contribution that they make to society. And my office has produced reports showing that older people are not this burden on society that the media often portrays them as, but actually they contribute far more to society. And over the next 50 years, the research from my office showed that the contribution of older people will be 25 billion, the net contribution, when you factor in all the costs. So this is the myth that the ageing population is a burden, and you contribute far more to society. But we do need to support that. There are policies that need to be in place to enable older people to live active, healthy, fulfilled lives. And we need to look at things like, I'm sure some of you in the room have a bus pass. No? Any of you use the bus pass? Yeah? Do you want to keep it? Yeah? Things like the bus pass are really good examples of government policy that's not just about transport, but it's a social policy. It's a policy that supports particularly our older generation to remain active and engaged and to provide volunteering, childcare, contribute to the economy. And we need more policies like that from our government, if we ever get one again, to support our older people and make sure that your contribution can continue in future. But there's also many other reasons why government needs to tackle the issue of loneliness and isolation, because it does have a major impact on the health of older people, both mental health and physical health. There's increasing amounts of research being done on this issue. One piece of research has highlighted the physical impact of loneliness on a person is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's the physical impact of somebody who is lonely. And the knock-on effect as a society for that is that people are going to get ill quicker. They're going to need more medical and healthcare support. And ultimately, when you just look at the black and white of the figures, that will cost government more money. So it makes sense. It's a no-brainer to invest in preventative measures that keeps people active for longer. It's good for people, but it's good for us as a society. And there's also evidence showing that people who are lonely are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Just think about that. Twice as likely to get Alzheimer's disease if you're lonely. That's a major issue in itself. When I was thinking about coming here today, I heard on the radio, I'd forgotten about, as Eamon had said, it's the longest day of the year. My 11-year-old daughter said to me, and she should know better, she said to me, so how long is today compared to yesterday? How much longer is it? And I looked at her and I said, how did you get your transfer test? She didn't get the concept, but it reminded me of my granny when I was growing up and what she said to my mum in the last few years of her life, and something my mum told me years later, that she said, often people think about loneliness around the winter months, in autumn and winter and the dark nights. And for my granny, it wasn't that. She was glad to get in at night time and lock her doors and get cosy by her fire. She told my mum that she was really lonely in the long days of summer because she could hear children out playing, and it reminded her of the old times when she had children herself. And that really struck a chord with my mum. And I think it shows you that for many older people, and I think of the last generation, many sort of felt loneliness was part of being old. It was accepted. It shouldn't be accepted. Absolutely shouldn't be accepted. Not for the person, but it's not good for society as well. And we all have a part to play as a society to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide the support, the services, to ensure that older people have the best possible chance of living fulfilled lives for longer and remaining connected to their families, to their communities, to their society. It's often something not talked about, and another issue that I'm looking at deeply in my term of office is the issue of scams. And unfortunately, many older people fall victims to scams that are happening throughout Northern Ireland. And again, there's a direct link between loneliness and isolation and your chances of being a victim of a scam. It makes sense. If you're sitting at home lonely and your phone rings, for many of us, it's a nuisance if it's a cold call or a possible scam. If you're lonely and you answer the phone, you're more likely to speak to the person at the other end. That's just a reality. You're more likely to pick up your post and look through your junk mail, some of which could be scams as well. So there's a clear link here as well in people being lonely and isolated and being at risk of being a victim of a scam. There are also more things we have to do to identify the key moments in people's lives when loneliness strikes. This just doesn't affect older people. Many younger people are lonely. It doesn't just affect people living in rural areas. Many people living in some of the biggest cities in the world, surrounded by millions of people, talk about being lonely. But there are key moments. Retirement is one time, a real change in people's lives, when suddenly they're not getting up in the morning and going out and meeting people. And that can sometimes lead to a knock-on effect, making that person feel lonelier and more isolated from society. Another big one, obviously, is the death of a spouse. Another time when a massive change in somebody's life would leave the big hole. And these are, I think, as a society and as a sector, we need to be looking at ways. It's not easy, but we need to be looking at ways of identifying people at risk and how do we make their interventions at those crucial times to try to reach out to people and help them out and give them options of being involved. And I think the range of options have to increase further. I think great progress has been made in the last 10 years. When I started in the age sector, a lot of the groups, and it's still the case to some respect, but a lot of the groups were dominated by women. And a lot of the groups said, look, we find it very difficult to get men out to groups. And I think what happened in some groups, and they accepted this themselves, because there were mainly women in the groups, then over time, most of the activities they did were aimed at women. And so I think we do need to make sure that wherever we're working, that we have a range of options. So whether somebody's interested in learning a language, knitting, building a shed, whatever it is, or just watching football, because that's what I want to do when I'm retired, that there's those options there for people to reach out and meet people who have similar interests as them. It struck me, the last event, I was just thinking this morning, the last event formal event I did on loneliness and isolation, I was speaking alongside Esther Ranson, and she spoke very well at it, because Esther Ranson is probably one of the most busiest people I've ever met. She's a patron of about 100 different charities. As we say here, she's in everything but the crib. But she talked very eloquently about that she was up in the morning from 7 or 8 every morning, out to late at night, was invited to many, many dinners, involved in many boards, many charities, lots of good work, and meeting people all day long. But she talked about when her husband passed away, the impact that had on her. And despite her meeting people morning, noon and night, 7 days a week, she said nothing could prepare her for coming home at night and closing the door to an empty house, and how loneliness hit her then. And I think it was very good to hear, even somebody, I think that said to people that anyone can be lonely. Anyone can be lonely. And there has been, I think, a bit of a stigma in the past where people just get on with it and don't admit how they're feeling. And I think that's something we have to work to break down. So there's lots of evidence to show that keeping active for longer is the way we need to go. Lots of events that I've attended over the last number of years, lots of academic research has shown the secrets to an active, healthy life are not rocket science. It's about your diet, it's about exercise. You can do something about both of them. It's about your genes, can't do much about that. But the other factor is social contact. It's clearly been shown that keeping connected to family and friends and your community is a key factor in living longer, healthier lives. And that's something that has to be at the forefront of our minds going forward. I'd like just to finish to, again, congratulate Engage with Age for being really at the forefront of highlighting the issue of loneliness and isolation for many years now. I remember one of the reports from many years ago, one of the best reports that I've ever read in the age sector, Gazing at the Four Walls, and it was really impactful, and it really highlighted this issue. And I pay tribute to all the people who have worked and engaged with Age in the past and in the present for keeping this as a big issue, but also for doing all the events that you do and all your activities throughout the year that keep people in your local communities engaged. And I really look forward to reading It's the People You Meet report as well, to build on that good work of the past and going forward. So thank you for your invitation, Linda and Eamon, to come along here today. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the morning and to more poetry and songs. Thank you very much.